up until a pivotal article that Ellen White wrote and was published in the Review in January of 1879, there were very few women that were serving as pastors. Sarah Halleck Lindsay, Mrs. Lane. There were a few wives of present ordained ministers were given licenses also to preach, and some of them did a lot of preaching. However, in the last part of 1878, Ellen White submitted a lengthy article to the Review. It was broken up into 3 segments and published. The first 2 were in the last part of 1878, and then the last one in January of 79. The thrust of the first two segments of the article were about women entering the brand new literature evangelism field. You probably remember that King had just started this field, experimented with it, and it was just brand new. And so she was encouraging women to enter that field. But then in 1879, the third segment of that article, she breaks away from that field and goes directly to preaching. And she starts out by reminding her readers that Mary was the very first preacher, and she uses that word, of the resurrection. And she says that Jesus chose her to be the first preacher. It wasn't an accident. Then she continues on and she waxes quite eloquent about this, and then she goes to one of her favorite ratios that she uses so often in her writing of 20 to 1. And she says if there were 20 women preaching where now there were 1, the work would go so much faster and it would be finished soon. This article was taken to heart by the conference leaders. And that year, as the conference sessions began to meet, most of them at camp meeting season in the summer, they began to license many more women. In fact, I think that 1879 was the apogee of the number of women licensed. And one conference alone, Minnesota, licensed 4 women, and that's not a huge conference, in that one year alone. And other conferences followed suit, especially in the Midwest. We saw almost no licensing of women on the East Coast or on the West Coast, but everything between. They really put their hand to the plow, taking that article seriously, and began to license ministers. So you see, this was 1879. 2 years later, right about the time when it would have been time to start looking at these new licensed ministers for credentialing, that is when, in 1881, the resolution came to the General Conference stating that the female pastors who were fit for that work and had shown themselves to be fit for it should be ordained just like their male counterparts. And of course that resolution, as we all know, was referred back to the General Conference Committee for further study. In most cases at the General Conference session, when something was referred back, it would be brought back the next day, because these committees would always meet in the evening between sessions. And this one, for some reason, never came back. Now, of course, Ellen and James White weren't there. They were at many of the others, including most of them where the women were given licenses. But they weren't at this one. James White, of course, had just died. And Ellen had been very sick and was recovering at that time and not able to attend the conference. Her family had moved her out of Battle Creek to get her away from the stress. And so she was in the mountains recovering at that point. So neither of them were able to be there for that meeting. So who knows what would have happened if they had been there. Maybe something different.